How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're starting Daf Yud Beis, Daf 12. No. Today we're starting Daf Yud Aleph, Daf 11 of Masechta Menachos. Friends, Daf 7. Wow, we've talked about Daf 12, Daf 11, and Daf 7. We should make a decision here. Okay, well, always go for the one in the middle. So Daf 11. All right. Friends, Daf Yud Aleph, Daf 11 of Masechta Menachos, a gewaldige Daf. I think it actually should be relatively smooth sailing, which is nice. I had to go out I was out last night, so I couldn't necessarily take advantage of the quicker Daf, but maybe it's a sign of some easier dafs coming up, which would be nice. Friends, it still is my goal I know I've been stuck in this hand-to-mouth kind of pattern for a while now, but I still am looking for the opportunity to get a daf ahead so that the dafs could go back to coming out at a consistent time every day. Al kol panim, today's daf, we first talk about a proper Kometz. What if there's too much? What if there's too little? Things like that. Next, we talk about when a mincha has too much oil. Of course, at least particularly, certain menachos, most menachos are brought with some oil. So what could be considered too much oil? Which, by the way, is going to be a new Mishnah. So we're getting to a new Mishnah. I think maybe that's our third Mishnah in Masechta Menachos. When a mincha has too little levonah, what is the minimum requirements for levonah for a mincha? I also have a photo of what might be levonah, which could help us just understand what we might be talking about. And when a mincha has too much levonah. So essentially, taking a kometz from a mincha and the oil and levonah, some halachas regarding to that. Friends, let's jump into Daf 11 of Masechta Menachos. Friends, we begin on Daf Yomi Menachos all the way at the bottom. Zokt the Gemara, or really just quoting the Mishnah, Kometz o garger melach o koret levonah posel. If one takes a kometz, a fistful, and we're going to learn about this fistful in just a few minutes. If a kohen takes a fistful from the korban mincha, and in that fistful of flour there is, or flour and oil in many cases, there is, flour and oil. When it comes to chavitin and minchas machvas macheshes, it's already like baked at that point. But anyways, whatever is supposed to be in the mincha, some kind of combination of either flour and oil. So if in that fistful is also a little pebble or a grain of salt or a particle of levonah, so maybe now is a good time to show our particle of levonah. So what I have here is, so if levonah is frankincense, I think this might be what frankincense is. A friend of mine, my chavrusa, Rabbi Yosef Goodman Levitt, I once bumped into him on Agrippa Street a few years ago, and he gave me some frankincense to eat, I believe. It might still be stuck in my teeth. It was certainly stuck in my teeth for longer than I would have liked it to have been. That, I believe, so let's say that this very well might at least be what we're talking about for levonah, which can help us understand, I think, what it means, like a particle of levonah, maybe one of those like little those little balls of levonah, of frankincense, right? Because otherwise, if we're talking about like what's a particle? Like a particle, like one itsy bitsy particle of flour. Like what are we talking about? But if we look at these like little balls, so maybe we're talking about one of those, right? So you take a fistful and there's a particle of frankincense in there. Okay. Says the Gemara, so in any of those cases, possible. If you take that fistful and there is a pebble, if there is a grain of salt, a particle of levonah, pasul. Kolhane lamatli. Why do I need all three examples? Because if we had only given the example of the pebble mishum delav basakrovi, because we don't offer pebbles on the mizbeach. That's why it's possible. Aval melach de basakrovi ema tiskasher. However, salt, which al kol korbancha tosim al kor korbancha tosim melech takriv melech al kor korbancha takriv. Oh gosh, maybe takriv al kol korbancha takriv melech. I think maybe takriv. Anyways, so with all korbanis, salt is added to it, and menachos are no exception. When the kometz is burnt on the mizbech, it is burnt together with a shtickle salt. So therefore, I may have thought that since salt is in fact something that is burnt on the mizbech, so maybe if that got mixed in with the kometz, it should be okay. Therefore, we had to say salt is also not okay. V'itana melach, and if we had salt, delo ikbaba de mincha meikora, okay, salt is a problem because it's not initially part of the offering of the mincha. The mincha is flour, oil, levonah. It's not salt. Every korban has salt. So you take the mincha, you burn it on the mizbech, and when you burn it on the mizbech, you burn it with salt, but it's not part of the korban itself. But frankincense, which is part of the offering, flour, oil, levonah. So maybe I might think that if a particle of levonah got mixed up in the kometz, maybe it could be okay. So maybe levonah could be kosher. Kamaj Milan, it's saying not that either. So whether it's a pebble, whether it's a grain of salt, whether it's a particle of levonah, if it gets mixed into the kometz, possible. Moving on. Because they had said hakometz hachoser or hayoser possible. Because what is the problem with a pebble or salt or levonah being mixed up in the kometz? The problem is that they had said that any mincha, that any kometz that is lacking or is too muching is possible. And if you have a kometz, and in the kometz there's a pebble, so the mass I think mass might be the right word there, the mass that is being taken up, or the volume, what's the difference between mass and, can either one work here? The volume, maybe volume is better, the mass, I don't know, who knows this? Dennis, do you know this stuff? Who knows this stuff? Who in Babble and Talmud would know the difference between mass and volume? What's the difference? Should I? Let me quickly ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT, what is the difference between mass and volume? Let's see what he says. Mass and volume describe different properties of matter. Mass is the amount of matter. What is the amount of space? Oh, what's the amount of space and outer? Oh, okay. So I think we probably want volume here. All right, friends. So it says that mass is what is the amount of matter in an object. Oh, I feel like both can technically work. It just depends how we frame it. Like the mass of the kometz needs to be entirely consisting of flour and oil, not any pebbles. Now, the volume, which is the amount of space an object takes up, so the volume that is being taken up by the pebble is volume that is therefore lacking volume that should be taken up by flour, and is therefore that volume is lacking. So either there's an issue with the mass of the kometz, or there is an issue with the volume. I think either one could work depending on how you choose to phrase it. All right, if anybody disagrees with that analysis, let us know. All right, here we go. We learned something about mass and volume. Learning physics here at Babble on Talmud. Okay, so now, the issue with the pebble, the salt, the frankincense is that the volume that is being occupied by the pebble, the salt, the frankincense should be occupied by flour offering contents. Forget about volume and mass. Chatzitza. Chatzitzin, mechitzin. What are the three things? Mechitzin, chatzitzin. No. Mechitzin, chatzitzin, and shiurin. Shiurin, chatzitzin, and mechitzin. Right? Shiurin, chatzitzin, and mechitzin are lochal Moshe Messinas, right? Anyways, so chatzitza, that's more physics, mass, volume. Chatzitza, now you're talking our language. So why are we saying that the issue is that there's not enough flour in your hand? The issue is that there's a chatzitza. Of course, we know already from Masechta Menachos, you can't have a chatzitza already. You can't have like a Kohen wearing a band-aid or something and holding a klisharis. You got to have direct contact. So therefore, if you're taking a mincha and there is a pebble between, if the Kohen takes a mincha, there's a pebble between his hand and the flour, that's a chatzitza. Or if the pebble's in the middle of the flour, it's like dividing up the, it's splitting the this part of the flour from that part of the flour. It's not one mass of flour. It's like dividing it up with the pebble. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Rabbi Yirmiyah min atzad. Well, says Rabbi Yirmiyah, you could say that the pebble or whatever is on the side. Hopefully I understand this correctly. It's a little bit technical. But friends, yeah, so like look at me for a second. Hopefully look at me, because hopefully I'm doing this somewhat right. But the here's my hand. The Kometz is these three middle fingers, index, or as we're going to see in a minute, called the etzba, the middle finger called the amma, and I think maybe this is called the ring finger, which is called the Kometz. So these three fingers are what you're going to fold over your palm, and you're going to fill that up with flour. Now, if the pebble is right on the edge there, right on the edge between the etzba and the thumb, which is called the gudel, that's a nice name, gudel, the gudel, okay, or a bowen, akaponim. So if you have, like, let's say a pebble in the flour, in between your, in the flour that's between like your pointing finger, your index finger and your thumb, or between your ring finger and your pinky, so it's not creating a chatzitza because it's off to the side. It's not between anything, and it's also not like in the flour dividing anything up. So in that case, the issue is going to be that the volume being occupied by the pebble should be occupied by flour. Okay. We are going to get back to my hand just in a moment. Okay. So that's why we are not concerned about chatzitza, because we're talking about where the pebble's on the side. So chatzitza is irrelevant. Amalei Abai l'Rava says, Abai to Rava, Ketzad komtzin. How do you kometz? How do you kometz? I'm going to explain to the best of my ability. They do say that kometzing is one of the more difficult avodas in the Beis Hamikdash, as we're going to get to in a few minutes. Hopefully I am explaining somewhat on the mark, close enough to the mark for it to be acceptable. So, Ketzad komtzin, how do you kometz? Amalei kide kamtze inche. So, Rava says, well, like people take fistfuls, meaning all the fingers, right? Friends, if I had to tell you, forget about kometzes for minchas. If I had to tell you, take a fistful of something, well, you take your whole fist and stick it into whatever. If I say, give me a fistful of cashews. Give me a fistful of cashews. So you'll go into the cashews jar and you'll put your whole hand in there, all 5 fingers, and scoop it up. And that's exactly what Rava says. What's the kometz? Get your whole hand involved. But Abai says, 1 second. Zo zeres, the pinky is called the zeres because a zeres is the measure between the tip of your pinky and the tip of your thumb. So because it starts at the tip of the pinky is referred to as the zeres because of the measure that it is relevant to. Zo Kometz, the ring finger, which I think is the finger next to the pinky, that is called the Kometz because it is where the Kometz ends. As I demonstrated a minute ago, it's the middle 3 fingers, which means that the Kometz ends with your ring finger, not at your pinky. Therefore, the ring finger is what's called the Kometz, an attribution to the Kometz. A homage. Is it even an homage? I don't know. To the Kometz. So amma, the middle finger is called the amma because there was a measure in the Beis Hamikdash that was an amma measure that would actually be from, I believe, the elbow to the tip of your middle finger. Therefore, the middle finger was called the amma. So etzba, your pointer finger, is called your etzba, and your zogudel, your thumb is called your gudel. Okay. New. So Rav is saying get the whole hand involved, yet Abai is pointing out that the ring finger is called the Kometz because that's where the Kometz ends and the pinky is excluded. So El lahashvos. When Rav says you get all your fingers involved, it's lahashvos, to smooth out the Kometz. The Kometz, as we're going to see in a minute, the Kometz needs to be neatly fitting between your middle three fingers and your palm. There's not anything sticking out. If anything's sticking out, it's a problem. That would be yaser. That would be too much. Therefore, if there's anything sticking out the sides, use your pinky to move that away, and use your thumb to move out anything sticking out from the other side. And that way, you're using your middle three fingers to have the scoop in between them and your palm, and you're using your thumb and your pinky in order to clean up the kometz. So you're using all five fingers. Heichi of it. How do yakometz? Amar of Zutra Bar Tuvye says Zutra Bar Tuvye Amar Rab Chofe Shalosh Etzbos Ad Shemagia Al Pas Yodo. Sheesh, that's going to require some. Actually, I guess I could do that. I can't touch my toes, but I could touch my palm. It depends how far down your palm you need to go. But you take your middle three fingers, and you basically, I don't know if you touch it to your palm. Do you touch it to your palm or just get it near your palm? I'm not exactly sure, honestly. Yeah, but when I do that, like all my fingers like stick together. I'm demonstrating. Yeah, I can't you might have to like practice this somehow. You might have to do like Kometz exercises. Yeah, there's probably Kohen schools. They probably teach you how to do this stuff. Anyways, maybe only Kohens have that. Do we have any Kohens in Babylon Talmud? Who's a Kohen at Babylon Talmud? Any Kohens? Cheva, what did you think about yesterday when we talk about the one Kohen takes the head of the sheep and he's just holding it like tucked with like the nose of the sheep head just like nestled between his like armpit and his like hands between the horns with the fats covering up the bloody mess, and then in the other hand he's got a leg. Kohanim, how are you feeling about that? Are you excited for that? You think you can get used to it? You practicing already? It's intense work being a Kohen. But then I guess you do get to eat a lot of meat, which that could be nice. Where were we? We were talking about the Kometz and how my fingers all smushed together. Shalosh etzbos ad shemagia. Okay, so you fold over your middle three fingers until they get to your palm. The Kometz, and then you slide. I believe you would then take your. I'm demonstrating now. You then take you have like a bowl of flour. You take this Kometz shape and you like slide it in to the bowl, and whatever fits in between your fingers and your palm, that is the Kometz. Tanya Ramiyochi. We also learn in a price like this, when it says fill up the Kometz, could it be that you have some sticking out the sides? So it has to be in the Kometz, nothing sticking out. So if in the Kometz, okay, maybe I'll just have a small little cute little Kometz. Maybe I'll just take my fingertips and get a little cute amount of Kometz between my fingertips and my palm, but the fullness of the Kometz is lacking. Maybe that's okay as long as it's in your palm. No, you got to fill up. It's got to be full, but not too filled. Just so. Okay, it's that also. You fold over the three middle fingers over your palm, the Kometz, and you get into the bowl and fill up that space between your fingers and your palm. Now, if we're talking about a minchas machvas and a minchas marcheshes, now those are baked before taking a kometz. Right? So the minchas machvas, minchas marcheshes, you will add some oil, add some flour, mix it all together. Then I believe you will, divide it up into 10. Maybe 10, 10 loaves, 10 or 12 loaves, 10. And then you'll put it on that. So like either put it in like a flat pan or like a deeper kind of pan. deeper oil pan, and you'll fry them. And then afterwards, you break them up. And after you break them up, then you do this. You take the kometz. Now the thing is, I think even the pieces that you break them up into, I think are kazayas pieces. Okay, so basically the point is, after you take the kometz, there's a good likelihood that there's going to be some pieces sticking out, right? Because you got to fill up the kometz, but you have like these kazayas pieces. We're not talking about like small little flour granules. We're talking about pieces that were baked in the oven already that are the size of a kazayas. So it's you're almost inevitably going to have some of the kometz sticking out above your index finger, below your pinky, your ring finger. So you're then going to have to use your pinky and your thumb to like break up those pieces so that you have a perfectly smooth kometz. So mochek begudlo milamaylo v'etzbo katana milamato. So you have to like break down the pieces that you just scooped up to smooth out the kometz at the top and bottom of the kometz. And this is the most difficult avoda in the Beis Hamikdash, to with one hand, it takes practice with one hand to fill up the kometz and also be able to break down the pieces that are too big to have a perfectly smooth kometz. Zo v'sulo, wait, 1 second. This gets the award for the most difficult avoda in the Beis Hamikdash. There are some other very difficult ones. Vayika malika. What about malika? Right, we had seen, according to one opinion in Masechta Zvachim, malika also be done with one hand. You have to like hold a bird in your hand. And with one hand, you have to hold a bird and also get your finger to the back of its neck and kill it, all while like holding its like legs between two fingers. You're like holding, I think it's legs between two fingers, its feathers, I think, between another two fingers, and then with your thumb, I think you're getting behind its neck and like getting in there, like, and killing it. That's pretty hard. And what about the kometz? What about the chofen, melo chofnav of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur? That's a hard one. Basically, when the Kohen Gadol goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, lifnai v'lifnim, so he goes in with a spoonful of ketores, of incense. Now, that ketores, he needs to fill up his two hands with that incense. He only has two hands. How does he transfer all of the incense from the like spoon that the incense is in order to fill up his hand perfectly? He needs to like either hold the incense spoon like by his teeth or by the tips of his fingers and somehow empty it down to fill up his hands like that. That's also a pretty difficult thing to do. Right? V'alika Malika, what about Malika? That's hard. V'alika Chafina, what about Chafina in the Kodesh Kadoshim? That's hard too. Elazo hi achas me'avodos kosher mikdash. This is just one of the challenging things that the Kohanim had to do in the temple. Amr Papa says, Papa, okay, now we're going to have a few tekus. You ready? It's obvious to me. Okay, so it's obvious to me that Melo Kumto, I'm going to do some demonstrations over here for anybody watching the video. So hopefully I'm demonstrating them relatively correctly. Oh, I should have brought a bowl. All right, I have a cup here. I have a cup of water. Okay, hopefully I won't spill it. I'm holding my cup of water. It's going to count as my bowl. Now, okay, so Kidikamse Inchi, so that means that basically you'll take like your kometz, which is this, and here's my cup bowl, and you basically like get in, like go in from the side and scoop up, okay? In from the side and like, oh wait, keep it close. In from the side and like scoop up like that, I think. I really hope I don't spill this water all over things that shouldn't get spilled on. Okay, that would be the correct way to do it. Amar Papa Pshita Limilo Kumtso Kidikamsi Jebayra Papa Kometz Barosha It's Boos of my. Okay. What if he went in, so here's my kometz, and he just kind of went straight in like that. Just straight in from the top and tried to scoop up like that. So not from the side, but he like scooped up top down and up. So what about that? Okay, next. Minat Stadin my Mimata Lamaila my Teku. What about minat stadin? What does that mean? That means that he takes the back of his hand and he just kind of lowers it down into the bowl right? Such that like all the flour kind of like pours into his hands from the side. What happens there? Or what about if he like digs if he like mimata lamala, right? He like takes his hand, like digs it into the bowl and lifts up like that. What happens there? Are those good? We said teku. We said we'll ask Eliyahu Hanavi. The good thing is that I guess these halachos become relevant in the Beis Hamikdash. By then we'll have Eliyahu Hanavi. We can ask him. Azoy. Amr Papa Pshitali Milo Chofnov Kidichafne Inche. Rav Papa also says that when it comes to the filling up of the hands on Yom Kippur with the incense. Now, however, this, unlike we discussed a minute ago, this is not in the Kodesh HaKodashim. This is initially, right? We said that the Kohen Gadol goes into the Kodesh HaKodashim with a spoonful of Ketores. How did that? And there's enough Ketores in there to fill up his two cupped hands when they're right, you put your two hands together. And you may, as if you're like washing your face or something from like a basin or something, take your two hands, put them together, and fill them up and splash them on your face, I guess. So, or I guess from a sink also, whatever, you fill up your two hands. So then, so we had talked about in the Kodesh HaKodashim, how he fills up his two hands. It's really difficult because he's got to empty it from the spoon, maybe using his teeth, whatever it is. But how does the Ketores get into that spoon in the first place? The answer is he's got a bowl full of Ketores or something, and he takes so Kidechafne Inche, basically you take your two hands, and I guess you'll put them into the bowl of Ketores or something, and you put them in from the sides, right, until they meet in the middle, and then you pick up whatever fits into right, you just kind of, I guess if you're looking at the video, just kind of scoop in like that, probably, something like that. So the normal way that people scoop, I guess that's considered. So Amar Papa Pshitali Milo Chofnov Kidechafne Inche. But Papa asks, Chofan Biroshetz Ba'osav Mao. What if he did it with I guess similar to like the Kometz, right? He takes the tips of his fingers, and he dives into it. Not his whole body, but he dives his hands into it. And it's kind of open like that, I guess. Doesn't feel like it would like fill up the whole your hands like that, but okay. I think that this is talking about because I think the proper chofen, I think, is also basically from the sides. I think you come in from the sides like that, but I think here the sides means like with the thumbs somehow. You came in thumbward. Okay, I don't know. I don't know how you do that, but somehow thumbward. Maybe like that or something. I don't know. And then there was another option. What if I think you basically took one handful and another handful and then joined them together? Teku. Let's go on. Let's move on. Papa asks, so after the Kohen takes the Kometz, he deposits it in the Kometz vessel. So that's got to go at the bottom of the Kometz vessel. What if you put it on the sides, on the walls of the Kometz vessel? B'dafne demona mai toch kli ba'inan. Do we say, well, it needs to be in the vessel? Va'ika, it is in the vessel. Or do we say it needs to be put like in it, on the bottom of it? And that's not the case. We're moving on. What if he flipped the vessel over and then attached it to the top of the vessel while it was flipped over? Do we say it just needs to be in the vessel? And it is in the vessel. Or maybe we needed to do it normally, and that's abnormal. Teku, let's move on. Friends, we get to a new Mishnah, which will then lead us into our next section, which is when a mincha has too much oil. Says the Mishnah, Ketzad u'osa poshetz ba'osav al pas yado. Okay, the Shita Mukubesa says that this line doesn't really belong here, because obviously we already talked about this in the Gemara, about how to take a kometz by sticking folding your middle finger, your three middle fingers over your palm of your hand. Shita Mukubesa suggests that really should be part of the previous Mishnah. In the Mishnayos, if you look in the Mishnayos, it actually is part of the previous Mishnah. Riba shamna chaser shamna chisa lefonasa psula. If there's too much oil, or too little oil, or too much frankincense, psula. Says the Gemara, Echidami riba shamna. Tell me more about too much oil. It says Rabbi Eliezer, you could I think, relatively safely change that to Rabbi Elazar, since I don't believe that there is an Amora named Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Elazar says, Rabbi Elazar kigon shefrish la shnei logan. Well, a mincha, like a regular mincha, person says, I'm bringing a korban mincha, 1 isarin of flour, 1 log of oil. If he designated 2 logs of oil for his mincha, well then, that's too much oil. Why are we assuming that it's talking about where he designated, meaning he was supposed to designate 1 log, but he designated 2 logs? Maybe what happened was some chulin got mixed into it. Or maybe some oil from another korban got mixed into it, from another another mincha got mixed into it. Why is it talking about that he had designated 2 logs? Maybe it's talking about where some other oil got mixed into his log, and now there's too much. There's some chulin oil or some oil from another mincha. And if you're going to suggest, because that is not possible, if you have some oil from another mincha or some chulin oil that gets mixed in to the mincha, if you say that is kosher, skip the next 5-6 words. Minchas chote the possible but shemen eichim mishkachas. Well, then how are you going to have a minchas chote be possible on account of oil, right? A minchas chote, right, by a korban olive yored, somebody who can afford to bring, right, the most he can afford is a minchas chote, right? Not birds, not animals, but just a mincha. So that is just a plain flour offering, no oil at all. Now, if there is oil in it, it's possible. Now, if we're saying that if some chulin oil or oil from another mincha gets mixed into it, that's not a problem, right? We're saying that's not the oil that is possible. Well, then, when will you have an instance where the minchas chote is possible on account of oil? If you say because you designated oil for it, but designating oil for a minchas chote is irrelevant because there isn't any oil to be designated, right? By a minchas solis, for example, where it's an isaron of flour and a log of oil, so already you're meant to be designating oil for the mincha, and if you designate too much, so then that could be an issue. I understand. But a minchas chote, which oil is irrelevant to it, well then designating oil for it is also irrelevant to it. So then what would be the scenario where oil is going to make it possible? It would have to be that it's possible on account of chulin that got mixed into it, or oil from another mincha. So if you're going to say that by minchas chote it's possible on account of oil because you designated oil for the minchas chote, but that's just irrelevant. And if we're talking about oil of chulin or of another mincha that got mixed in, we had just suggested that it's not possible on account of that. Rabbi Elazar lo mibayah comment. The answer is no. Of course, Rabbi Elazar says that if oil from another mincha or chulin oil gets mixed into the korban mincha, of course that is going to be possible. Lo mibaya de chulin v'dechaverta de possible. Of course, if oil that's chulin or from another mincha gets mixed into the korban mincha, it's going to be possible. Aval de parish la shnei logan. However, if somebody were to have set aside 2 logs of oil for a korban mincha, ho'il V'hai chazile ema lo lifsil. I may have thought that, well, since if you're setting aside 2 logs of oil for 1 mincha, either log could be the winning log, right? Meaning, you set aside an isaron of flour and a log of oil. So if you set aside 1 isaron of flour, 1 log of oil, givaldik, perfect. Now, if you set aside 2 logs of oil, we're saying that's a problem. But at the same time, neither log is inherently problematic, right? You could say, okay, this is going to be my log, or that's going to be my log. Both of them are inherently kosher, just you're bringing too many of them. So therefore, I may have thought, right, since each one on its own is fit for the for the korban, for the mincha, right? Either one on its own is perfectly acceptable for this korban mincha. Emelo lifsil, maybe I would say it's not possible. So kamash malan, we are saying that it is going to be possible. Minale, the Elazar ha. How does Rabbi Elazar know this? Rava says masnis and kshise, because he had a difficulty. He looked at our Mishnah and he was scratching his head. My iri detani riba shamna lesne riba la shemen. It could have just said that if there's too much oil, it's possible. But it says riba la shamna, it's oil. It means that when there's too much of its oil, that he specifically set aside too much oil for it, right? So instead of setting aside one log for it, he set aside 2 logs for it. That is going to be possible. Moving on to the next section of our Gemara, when a korban mincha has too little levonah, i.e., what is the minimum amount of levonah necessary to be offered with a korban mincha? Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Chasar va'amda al koret echad psula al shnei kratin ksher divrei Yehuda. Yehuda says that, so, imagine that, right, that levonah, I'll pull that up again. Right here, you have this frankincense. Over here, you have all of these particles, assuming that this is the correct frankincense. You have all those particles of frankincense, and then, I don't know, somehow it all goes missing or something, and you have 2 of those little particles left. Rabbi Yehuda says that would be okay. 1 particle is too little. 2 particles, you're okay. Rabbi Shimon Omer al koret echad kishera pachos mikan psula. Says Rabbi Shimon, you have to have 1 full particle. Less than that becomes an issue. V'atanya, we have a question. Rashi says that this is apparently a brisa that is attributed to Reb Shimon. Kometz levonah shechaser kolshu posel. We have a brisa that says that a kometz of levonah that is missing any amount of it is posel. Tni koret levonah shechaser kolshu posel. Say that if you only have 1 koret of levonah and it is missing and it's incomplete, that is going to be an issue. By saying alternatively, kan bilevona abba ima mincha, kan bilevona abba b'fnei atzma. Well, alternative, you could say, look, a kometz that if a person says, I'm going to offer a kometz of levona, right, a person donates a kometz of levona, well, then it has that everyone agrees that's going to have to be a full kometz. But if we're talking about that with a korban, right? If with a mincha, you are offering levonah, that with the korban mincha, you're offering levonah. So in that case, Reb Shimon says, as long as you have 1 full particle of levonah, you are okay. Amar Yitzchak Reb Yosef, Amar Reb Yochanan. Gimel machlokes b'davar. There are 3 opinions here when it comes to the minimum amount of levonah to be offered with a korban mincha. Reb Meir's opinion is the opinion that we had in the Mishnah. Kometz batchila v'kometz basof. Right? What did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah has said, Chise levonasa psula. That if the kometz of levonah is missing any amount, possible. So it says, Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, in the name of Reb Yochanan, that Reb Meir's opinion is that just like when you initially set aside levonah for the mincha, it has to be a full kometz. So, batchila v'kometz basof, it also has to be a kometz in the end as well. That needs to be what's actually ultimately burnt on the altar. Rabbi Yehuda savar kometz batchila. Rabbi Yehuda agrees, as does everyone, that initially what's set aside for the mincha is a kometz of frankincense. The shnei kratin basof. However, at the end, even if you lose almost all of it, so long as you have 2 particles, you're okay. Reb Shimon savar kometz batchila v'koret echad basof. Whereas Reb Shimon's opinion is that also at the beginning you have to have a full kometz, but at the end just 1 particle. V'shloshta mikra echad darshu, and all 3 opinions derive from the same verse. That's kol alevona asher la mincha, and all of the levona that is being offered with the korban mincha. Reb Meir savar adi isa the levona de ikba bahade mincha meikar. You have to have all of the levona that was initially designated and set aside with the korban mincha, i.e. the full kometz. Rabbi Yehuda savar kol. So Rabbi Yehuda says that when the pasuk says kol, it's like when it says in the Navi in the shifchascha kol, that I don't have anything. Kol, as in like anything that, i.e., if as long as there's any amount of frankincense, then that is sufficient. Right? Rabbi Yehuda savar kol bafilu koret chad koret. That when it says ves kol al levonah, so kol means any amount of levonah, all good. Es l'rabas koret. But when it says es kol al levonah, so it's l'rabas koret acher, to say that you also need one more. Okay, so any amount plus one more, i.e., 2 particles of levonah is sufficient. Reb Shimon es lo darish. Reb Shimon does not darshan the es to say you need another particle. Therefore, any amount of levonah, any amount of particles of levonah, you have to have at least one particle. But at least one particle is sufficient. That, as we saw earlier, the machlokas is specifically by levonah brought together with a flour offering. But a standalone levonah offering, if a person says, I'm going to bring levonah, I'm donating levonah to the Beis HaMikdash, if it's coming on its own divrei kol, kometz batchil v'kometz basof, everybody agrees in that case, you're going to have to burn a full kometz of levonah. Lachi itzrich asher ala mincha. That's why the pasuk says that when we talk about es kol alavona asher ala mincha, when we talk about kol, any amount, es kol, maybe you need 2 particles, that's specifically asher ala mincha. That's specifically when the levona is being brought together with a flour offering. That with a mincha, you can get away with 1 or 2 particles according to Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda, respectively. But if it's standalone, then the pasuk is not talking about that, and you have to have the full kometz. And it also says Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef Amar Rabbi Yochanan that the machlokes over here, that Rav Meir, Rav Yehuda, Rav Shimon, is by levonah that is being brought with a korban mincha. But of course, we know with the showbreads, with the lechem aponim, there's the 2 bazichin on the shulchan as well. Those bazichin are filled with a kometz of levonah each. The entire kometz would have to be burnt there as well, right? 2 full kometzes. Pshita, this is obvious. Since these bazichin are being brought together with the lechem aponim, I may have thought that it's like the frankincense that's brought together with a regular korban mincha. So kasher ala mincha damya, it's like kasher ala mincha, and I might think it's like asher ala mincha, and therefore maybe the machlokas would apply here as well. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon would say you only need 1 or 2 particles. Kamash malan, that no, we don't treat the burning of the frankincense for the lechem aponim like the burning of the frankincense for a regular mincha, and by the lechem aponim we'll have to have the full kometzes of frankincense. Pligi ba Reb Ami v'Reb Yitzchak Nafcha. There is a machlokes between Reb Ami and Reb Yitzchak Nafcha on this very topic. Chad Omer machlokes belevona aboy mamincha hava belevona aboy b'fnei atzma divrei kol kometz batchil v'kometz basof. One opinion is, as we've been saying, that the machlokes is specifically by a kometz of frankincense being brought together with it as part of a korban mincha. But if it's being brought on its own, so then no machlokes, you'd have to have a full kometz. And the other opinion is nisht, just like there's a machlokes by frankincense brought with a korban mincha, there's also a machlokes when it comes to a standalone frankincense kometz as well. Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda would still say that 1 or 2 particles is sufficient there as well. And finally, for the final section of our daf today, when a mincha has too much levonah, the Mishnah had said, Chisa levonasa psula. So the Mishnah dafka said that if there's too little levonah, it's possible, and we discussed what too little means. Implying a yasser kshera, implying that, okay, but too much levonah is okay, but tanya yasser psula. And then the Brayta said too much levonah is not okay. It's possible. Amarami by Chama Kigon Shefish la Shnei Kmatzin. Well, for example, if you had set aside 2 kometzes of if he had set aside 2 kometzes of frankincense, right? 2 kometzes of frankincense, because together with the mincha, you bring just 1 kometz of frankincense. If he had set aside 2 kometzes, well, then that's going to be a problem. The Rambam had said, kilu, any amount between 1 kometz and 2, kilu, less than 2 kometzes it would be okay. But if you set aside 2 kometzes, that is too much. If you had set aside 2 kometzes, so that's going to be a problem. 2 kometzes of frankincense. But one of them got lost before I assume it means the kmitza of the korban mincha, which means that lemaisa, at the time of the kmitza of the korban mincha, there was only 1 kometz of frankincense. Lo hukbeu, well, it's okay, because sort of at game time there was only 1. What was there at game time was 1 kometz of frankincense, and that's okay. Achar kmitza, but if at the time of the kometz there were 2, at the time of the kmitza of the mincha there were 2 kometzes of frankincense, well then hukbeu, then at the time of kmitza they were kind of established as being too much frankincense, and that's going to be a problem. Hifrish arba'a kmatzin l'shnei bazichin. If for the 2 bazichin of levonah for the lechem aponim, 4 kometzes were set aside for the 2 bazichin, twice as much as needed. V'avdu shnai mem kodem siluk bazichin, and 2 of them got lost before the bazichin were removed from the shulchan to be burnt on the mizbeach achitzon. Lo ukbeu, then it's okay, because at the time of the siluk of the bazichin there was only 2 kometzes, and that is all good. Le'achar siluk bazichin, but if the additional 2 kometzes only got lost after the bazichin had already been removed, well then hukbeu, at the time of the removing of the bazichin, it was established as having too much levonah, and it's a problem. Hasu lamali, why do I need this example? Hanuach, is the example by the lechem aponim not just the same example by the regular korban mincha? Right, by the korban mincha we had said it only needs 1 koret of levonah. If there's 2 korets of levonah, so it depends if it's before the kometz, if it's before the kmitza of the mincha or not. And we're essentially saying the same thing by the lechem aponim. There you need 2 kometzes of levonah. If at the time of the removing of the bazichin, which is essentially the equivalent of the removing of the kometz from the regular mincha, there was too much frankincense, it's going to be a problem, right? So it's the same thing be'etzim. So ma'u detema meiv dot kevin de barir kometz dida kevin shegias mana leforka command the prika damyo kamashvan. Well, the thing is, what's unique about the korban, the lechem aponim, as we had seen the other day, is that because milchatchila you already know what the kometz is for the lechem aponim. It's the 2 bazichin, the 2 spoons full, or the 2 container, or the 2 the 2 vessels filled with frankincense. You already know that those are going to be the 2 that are going to be separated. It's not like a korban mincha where it's like all flour and you need to separate a fistful. You don't know what the fistful is going to be until you separate it. Here you know what the frankincense is going to be. It's the 2 bazichin full with the kometz of frankincense in them. So therefore, maybe when it becomes time to remove them, it should be already as if they're removed. And at that point already, if there's 4 kometzes of frankincense, it should be a problem. No, it only becomes a problem once the bazichin are physically removed and taken to be burnt on the mizbeach achitzon. Friends, that was daf 11 of Masechet Menachos. Interesting. This I would consider this to be like an easier daf of the past 5 months. And interesting, I think we're already at 50 minutes or something. Even the easy dafs, it's like there's no half an hour dafs around there. Huh? Anyways, first at the beginning of the daf we discussed a proper kometz, no pebbles, no grains of salt, no levonah particles in the kometz. You take your 3 middle fingers, you fold them over your palm, you scoop in from the side, and you smooth the edges out with your thumb and pinky. Got it? Good. When a mincha has too much oil added from chulin or from another mincha is going to be problematic. An additional log set aside for that mincha itself is also going to be problematic. When a mincha has too little levonah, there was a 3-way machlokas there. So first of all, even before that, there was actually machlokas you saw, I think, between Rav Ami and Rav Asi about does this machlokas bichlal apply only to a to frankincense that's brought with a korban mincha, but frankincense brought on its own, like if somebody donates to bring levonah to the Beis Hamikdash, one opinion is that this machlokas would not apply there. Everyone agrees you would have to have a full kometz. But there was an opinion that said that this machlokas would apply there as well, even by a standalone kometz, that we would have the following machlokas, which is, Reb Meir says you need the full kometz. Reb Yehuda says that you have to have at least, everyone agrees you have to start out with a full kometz, but if at least 2 particles of frankincense remain, it's kosher. Reb Shimon says at least 1 particle. Now again, there was a machlokas about if this 3 machlokas would apply also to a standalone kometz or not. Right? According to one opinion, by a standalone kometz, everyone says it has to be the full kometz of frankincense. The other opinion is that this same machlokas applies to standalone kometzes of frankincense as well. And then finally, when a mincha has too much levonah, so that means more than 1 kometz for a mincha. The truth is more than 2 kometzes for a mincha would be meaning 2 or more kometzes for a mincha is a problem. The Rambam had said between 1 and 2 could be okay. And if at the time of kmitza there is too much levonah, at that point it's a problem. But if it gets lost to an acceptable level of levonah prior to the kmitza of the mincha, so then it is okay, because it's the time of the kmitza of the mincha that is going to determine whether we consider there to be too much frankincense or not at the time of the kmitza. Friends, that was Daf 11 of Masechta Menachos. I hope you enjoyed. Catch you later. Cheers.